Welcome to our class. In this class, we will learn about some very useful and necessary structural elements. Most of these are new in HTML5. Your website will have a natural structure. It will have a header section, a navigation section. It might have a footer area. It might have a main area. You might split up a certain area into sections. You might have articles. You might have additional content such as an aside. Your web page will have a structured layout. Now, within these structural elements, you will have other elements. You will have paragraphs. You will have block quotes. You will have inline content, images, videos, etc. Similar to laying out a house where you have certain rooms, you will have that type of architecture or blueprint for your website also. These structural elements do not have any formatting other than they are all block level elements, meaning that they take up 100% the width of their parent container and they have a margin on the top and on the bottom. So you cannot place two side by side unless you use style sheets. In this image that I have, you can see there is a layout and there are borders, and that is done with CSS. The purpose of HTML is to be a container and markup language for your content. So we have descriptive elements that identify the nature of the content, such as a header section, a footer section, a navigation section, etc. So what I have done, I have put borders around my HTML elements so you can actually see. Notice that they all extend the width of the page and they are all stacked on top of each other. So here we see a header element. You should always start your web page with a header. The header should contain an H1 level element in it also. You will also have a navigation section, and that is the nav element, and that is where the navigation links will reside. You might have a main element that might define the main contents of the document, which of course will contain other elements. An aside will be used to define content outside of the normal page, such as a sidebar. The section element will define a section in the document or a section inside another structural element. An article element would define an article in the document. Article elements are commonly used in blog. Now we have a generic div. A div is an HTML4 element that just exists if there are no other suitable structural elements that would have meaning. For example, in order to center your web page, you might just put it inside a div and set that at a fixed width and center it. We will cover this later. You should always have a footer section, which defines the footer for a document or also for a section. So these are structural elements that in and of themselves really do not do anything other than contain content. Here we see a header element. And notice I have some HTML inside it. There's my H1 element. Notice I am using special characters so that I can display the greater than and less than sign on my web page, as you see here, so that I can show you the HTML element in the web page. Here we have a nav element, a main element, an aside element, section, article, div, and the footer. Because they are structural elements, which I sometimes refer to as container elements because they contain content, they will generally have a lot of content in them. I prefer putting the opening tag on one line and the closing tag on one line so it's easy to see the beginning and end of the container. All of these structural elements, except for the div, are new in HTML5. So these are our commonly used structural elements.